Yeah, Bob and Donna, as you can see here, Jessi Tenor has finally made her way out after witnessing, one of the executions. Marcel Williams. Um, First of all, how are you doing?
Honestly, fine. I mean, it was very methodical. It was, as far as we could tell, the inmate wasn't having any sort of trouble throughout it, any sort of problems. And so for all of us, I mean, it was, once it did happen, once it started, it was honestly, you know, like I keep saying, we just kept doing our role, and it was not horrible to watch, to be
Right.
there. It didn't look like he was struggling that much.
And you were able to take a lot of notes, Jessi. First, take us back to when you were seated. You were seated once, and then I guess taken out to the van. Is that right? And then seated once again at about 9:30.
Yes. So at that time, I mean, we had no idea what was going on. We were sitting down for quite some time, and we thought that everything was going to happen. This is kind of weird, actually, but we actually heard Marcel Williams on the other side of the door, even though it was very quiet in our room. We heard him on the other side of the door, and the woman said, "That's Marcel Williams' laugh. He has such a great laugh." So we are all here, very quiet, very somber, waiting for something to happen, and here's this inmate giggling and having fun with the staff, and that really took me by surprise.
So once you were seated for the second time, what happened then?
So we thought that, okay, this is going to happen. We're being seated again. Let's get ready for this to happen now. All of us had pens, paper ready. We sat there for quite some time again. And we don't know, we weren't told if that was because there was a delay with putting the IV in. Usually they are put in both arms,
Correct.
each IV. But this time it was only put in one arm, in his right arm. And there was one by his wrist, and there was one up here by his elbow.
Right.
And so we were wondering if that maybe... if there was problems with the IV, but we haven't been told anything of that, so that might be why it took a little longer.
So you think we might learn more about that tomorrow if we don't at this hour? It's almost midnight, so.
Right. I would think so, since the ADC is usually pretty good about sending out that timeline breaking down, because we can only see so much. And even when they pull back the curtain, to really know what's going on. And so hopefully they'll be able to shed a little bit of light of what was actually going on the parts where we couldn't see.
Let's talk about the consciousness test. After the midazolam was issued, was more than one consciousness test given? Was he given also a second dose of midazolam after the first one?
So at first, starting off with the consciousness test, I'm not exactly sure what times they did that, but they did do multiple.
They did.
He kind of always started with the hand. He would mess with the hand a little bit, do some squeezing, and then slowly move up by feeling on his arm. And then he did do the eyeball check to where he did lift up the eyelid and felt his eye, and there was no movement there whatsoever. But what did make us think that they did issue another dose of that midazolam was that they did a couple other consciousness checks about 5-10 minutes after the first one, and so they don't tell you when they're administering the drug again. It's very quiet. They don't say when they're doing anything. You just have to watch. And so and just watching and keeping a close eye on it, we were able to determine, okay, it looks like they would have given a second dose because they did the consciousness tests, kind of an abbreviated version again, before administering that paralytic.
We're back now.
We're back.
So we were talking about how a man 400 pounds breathing on his back, it would be more pronounced. At least that was their argument anyways, to be expecting that.
Right. And then the other side of the argument was that it would be cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah.
But, from what we saw, there wasn't that much struggling, there wasn't that much suffering. It was just kind of the labor breathing for a little bit, and then it did even out.
And this was a unanimous decision on all accounts from the media witnesses that the three of you did not notice anything unusual or that would fall under the category of unusual or cruel and unusual punishment.
Right, we're being very careful to say that, though, because in all of these hearings, they say that even with midazolam, I mean, it can look like an inmate isn't suffering, but on the inside, you don't know how they're feeling.
Very
But
good
all
point.
we can say is just from the outside, there was no clenching of the fingers into a fist to make it look like he was in pain. There was no grimacing of the face, really, to make it look like he was in pain. And so from the outside, we can kind of agree on that.
And were you focused on one specific area and your fellow media reporters were focused on different areas?
We were trying to do that at first, but then once the back and forth, we were just like, take as best of notes as
Right.
possible,
Okay.
and just check for any movement. That was our big thing. Check and make sure to find any body part that would be moving. But like I said, most of the time it was just his mouth twitched just a tiny bit, of course his chest, and then once his eyes did close, the right eye stayed open for the rest of the time, a tiny bit. It was just a little slit.
So were you able to hear anything, see his lips moving as if he was trying to speak? He didn't have anything to say for his final words, is that right?
Right, and so we just saw him. He was strapped down with this chest strap, and then his head was strapped down too. And all he did was just look straight up at the ceiling. And people were asking us just in the press conference now, what was the last thing he saw? And so it would actually be these fluorescent lights right above him. Was that he was just staring into that, and then slowly his eyes just closed. And other than the little bit of the mouth twitching at the one point when the heavy breathing kind of subsided, that's really the only thing we saw. He wasn't trying to say really much else, I don't think.
At that point, is the curtain drawn and the official time of death is released?
Correct. So as soon as the person kind of presiding over the process is able to call in the coroner does his thorough check and then gives the time of death. And then the ADC director, she came out and read a little something saying this was the time that the first drug was administered. This was the time of death. Here is why he was here in the first place. And then the curtains closed.
Wow. And were you able to see, I'm sure the rest of the room was quiet. Were you able to see any of the reaction of some of the other witnesses, possibly family members that were able to watch this unfold?
So we did confirm that no family was in the same room that we were. They were watching it on a video screen. You could see a camera actually above where we were that was probably feeding that video back to them. But there was the civilian witnesses. I know there was several in there. You could just kind of tell that toward the end, we couldn't really see what was going on at the moment, but kind of at the end when everybody was starting to walk out, they were the first ones to leave, and you could just kind of tell it was, like a draining experience.
Right. Well, Jessi, I mean, everything that you've seen has been so valuable to us and to many people across the state and even the country that have been watching this all unfold.
Yeah, great job. We appreciate your time and your
Thank you.
expertise on this. So Donna and Bob, a very interesting and exclusive perspective from our very own